We do this work because of the generosity of a lot of people who make it possible for us to do it, and to do it for free, to make available events like this one around the state, more than 50 events around the state a year for free, as well as all the content we produce on a daily basis at the Tribune. Sponsors support our events. They cover the costs and make it possible for us to be here and to take the conversations elsewhere. AT&T, BP, PepsiCo, Walmart, and Southwest Airlines are the generous supporters of our event series. Today we have added Fibertown as a sponsor of today's event. Please give those sponsors a big hand. They make it possible for you to be here. If you're not a member of the Tribune, I'd encourage you to consider becoming one. We're citizen-supported public media. You all pay the freight to some degree as well, and we do this for you. If you are a member, thank you. We appreciate you. If you're not a member, we're happy to sign you up on the way out. Or if you want to break out your phone, you can text the word Tribune to 444-999, and you can make a gift on mobile. But however you approach this, we appreciate you, and if you do support us, thanks. And if not, you're still welcome to come to our events. Now, we are in the process of scheduling a couple events here at the Austin Club over the next couple of weeks. I'd say stay tuned about that. But let me tell you about three things that I know are coming up not in Austin. We are going to go to Chancellor Sharp's home base of Victoria, actually, on October the 17th, on the subject of Harvey and the rebuild, and in particular, the impact of the storm on communities in the affected areas. A lot of attention, understandably and necessarily, has been on Houston and Harris County, but we're concerned as much about the communities outside of Houston and outside of Harris County, and we're going to talk about that today. So we have a conversation over the lunch hour at Victoria College featuring the mayors of Victoria, Port Aransas, Fulton, and Rockport, talking about the impact of the storm on their communities and their enormous rebuilding effort that they're already full on in the middle of. That'll be October the 17th over the lunch hour. On October 23rd, we'll be on the campus of Lone Star College in the Woodlands with Senator Brandon Creighton, Representative Tom Oliverson, talking about the 85th regular and special sessions, byproducts of those. Obviously, everything is bending in the direction of Harvey, so in some ways we're having a Harvey conversation every place we go, and good thing too. But we'll be doing that on the campus over the lunch hour of Lone Star College in the Woodlands, October 23rd. November 3rd on the Texas Tech University campus, similar deal, debriefing the session, looking ahead, talking about Harvey with Senator Charles Perry, Representatives John Frullo, and Dustin Burrows. November the 3rd, Texas Tech. Those will all be live streamed. If you're not there, you're absolutely welcome to watch them online. If you have phones, let me ask that you turn them to silent, please. Remember to do that. The hashtag, if you tweet about this event, is TT Events. We'll do the usual 35 to 40 minutes of conversation, balance of time, questions with our guests from the audience, and then we'll get you out of here by 9 o'clock. Okay? Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest, John Sharp, who was appointed by Greg Abbott to lead the newly formed and formally christened Governor's Commission to rebuild Texas on September 7th. As the state's so-called hurricane recovery czar, Mr. Sharp is charged with coordinating the rebuilding of infrastructure devastated by storms that caused widespread flooding and unfathomable damage in southeast Texas and along the Gulf Coast. He is also, not incidentally, the 14th chancellor of the Texas A&M University System. Named to that post in 2011, he leads a system of 11 universities and 7 state agencies with an annual budget of $4.5 billion and an enrollment north of 148,000 students. He previously spent 3 decades in public life, including 20 in elective office. A native of Victoria County, he has an undergraduate degree from Texas A&M and a master's degree in public administration from the old Southwest Texas State University. Please join me in welcoming Chancellor John Sharp. Thank you for being here, sir. Good to be with you, sir. Thanks for making time for us.
You bet.
You could not be busier.
Yes.
Yeah. Chancellor, why you? Governor could have named anybody. Why you?
I don't know.
I know you to be a deeper thinker than that.
Who's going to be the straight man this time, you or me?
Oh, I am. I'm always with you. I'm always the straight man. No, seriously, why you? Why do you think he picked you, and why do you think you're the right person for this extraordinary job? It's a once-in-a-thousand year or maybe a once-in-ever storm. It's going to take a once-in-ever effort to rebuild it. That's a lot of work and burden on your shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I mean, I think he wanted somebody with some experience with dealing with legislators, public officials.
Right.
You know, maybe the politics of it a bit. And not that I'm terribly successful in politics, but at least I know some of them. And I don't know. I guess done this kind of free stuff before. So
Was there any chance you were going to say no? I mean, how do you say no?
it wasn't a question.
How could you say no?
He did not ask a question.
He didn't. Was that right? It was you will, not will you.
Yeah.
Right. So you were named, I'm doing the math.
Actually, what he said
Yes.
was this is what you're going to do. And I said, do I get to keep my day job? And he said, yes. He said, you probably only spend 8-10 hours a day on that, right? And I said, yeah. I said, well, you got 14 more.
Left. I mean, there's plenty of time. I mean, that is certainly a question that a lot of us, I want to come to the sober topic of what you've seen in the course of the weeks you've been doing this in a second, but that was an immediate question. How's he going to do both jobs? I mean, the reality is being chancellor of one of the big public university systems not just in Texas, but in the country, is a full-time job, by which I really mean it's a couple full-time jobs, just by itself. So how do you do both well?
I have great staff. I mean,
Yeah.
really, I thought I had a good staff when I was controller. I obviously have some of those same people now, Billy Hamilton,
Right.
and some folks.
Yeah, in fact, Ross asked me the other day, has the chancellor bitten off more than Billy Hamilton can chew? The kind of joke that gets a big laugh at the Austin Club. I'm not sure where else.
Nowhere else. Yeah. But, I mean, from the vice chancellors for research, the super deans, the vice chancellors for agriculture, engineering.
Right. They're keeping an eye on the home fires while you're doing this.
They're the best that exist. They really are.
Are you dividing your time roughly equally among the two, or between the two, or are you spending more on the hurricane now?
More on the hurricane now,
Right.
and I suspect that'll be true for the first year. Maybe.
Foreseeable future. So as I'm doing the math, the hurricane hit 25, 26, 27, that sort of last part of August. It was almost 2 weeks before you were named, and now it's been another 2.5, 3 weeks, almost, probably approaching 4 weeks since then. So you got into it, it had already been in place for a couple of weeks. When you got out on the road and began to see the damage, talk about that and talk about what you've seen in the interim. Like, how quickly are people being able to pivot back, and how bad was it? I think for a lot of us, the images on television, we did not get to go to the affected areas. The images were really just, you couldn't believe it.
Well, the rain at Nederland set all-time, I'm not sure it's a world record, but it's certainly a United States record, 64.5 inches of rain.
Yeah.
Fell in that neck of the woods.
Yeah.
That's never been done before in the United States. No, there's never been a continuous rain event that produced that.
That much.
The debris that is out there, we calculate, to put it in terms you can understand, it would fill Kyle Field to the top of the lights 75 times. That's how much debris has to be cleaned up. So it's, particularly around Rockport and some of those areas.
Yeah.
There's both vegetative and, man-made debris. So, job one is to get that stuff cleaned up. The way we're doing this is a little bit different from other disasters in that it's a real bottom-up enterprise. In other words, the mayors and the county judges, along with advice from their legislators, are the ones that call the shots. For instance, we may think that a county doesn't have enough debris haulers, and we can get those debris haulers, but if that county judge or that mayor says, no, that's the number I want, then that's the number they get.
Right.
All of the requests for funding, things like that, all come from them. What we have at the top level of this is some very good people from NIM Kid, that the governor's put together, the head of the Texas Education Agency, Tony Robinson, who's the FEMA representative, who may be the best FEMA employee in the country. We've been very pleased with him so far. George P. Bush is in charge of all of the housing. Right. That was set up, put in that agency when Patterson was there by Perry, so yes. He has all of that. And just tons of people at our disposal to solve problems. What we did, if you go into Katrina and some other disasters, you'll find that they paid tens of millions of dollars for consultants to go down in there and stay with the parish sheriff or local official or the mayor or whatever. Hey, what's your problem? And we'll get the problem back. We're not doing that. We use our extension service. As you know, we have people in offices in 252 of 254 counties. The only place we don't have them is like, I think Hudspeth and some of those.
We in this case is A&M.
A&M.
Right.
Part of the system,
Right.
not the university.
Right.
The county agents, they call them. And all of them have staffs. They got kids in school there. They live in Aransas County.
Yep.
Their kids are there. They know the judge and all. And so what every judge is assigned someone from that extension service. Every mayor is assigned someone for that extension service, with the exception of Houston, which we use our government relations staff. Like John Otto, who now works for us, is Sylvester's and works with Ed Emmett and folks like that.
Right.
And so every day they're available to those local folks, and they get a request for anything, whether it has to do with debris, whether it has to do with anything. They get that to us in College Station where we've set up room, and then we get their problem solved or answered or whatever.
So you've answered one question I was going to ask you about how exactly this works. You really are first and foremost a resource for these communities, these affected areas, and these elected officials.
Right.
They come to you and they say, we have a problem, we need you to help solving it. But the decision making about what problems and how to solve the problems and all that is really coming from them.
Exactly.
Not coming from
An
you.
example is, I think we saw your story about some debris problems in one particular place. Called them, said, you have a problem. And this one particular mayor, I'm not sure its exact place, but it was in Southeast Texas, one particular judge said, hey, I got a local debris hauler, and he says that, we're not going to stay unless you pay us more money.
Yep.
And he was kind of panicked, saying, I don't want to pay him more money, because he asked the guy, said, well, if I pay you more money, are you going to pass that down to your subs? That way you can get more people. And they found out, he said yes, but then they found out, no, that's not the case.
Right.
He was just going to take the profit, kind of general scumbag. But he
That's the technical term, right?
So what we did, technical term, so what we did is the next morning we had 20 or 40 trucks show up.
Right.
This guy only had 10 or 15.
Yeah.
And then once he realized that, oh, they do have resources,
Right.
they really don't need me. If I go back to Florida, which is where he's from and which I wish he'd stay, but he said, maybe I'll keep this job anyway.
Right.
And so there are more people out there that can haul debris, but we have to get a judge or mayor ask
for it to happen. You have the power to deploy those resources.
Right. And we can suspend,
Right.
Abbott will suspend every rule that exists.
In order to get the recovery.
On anything. I mean, he suspended burn bans. We had landfills that were operating because of some rules, 7 to 7, suspended that, made it 24 hours. Landfills that it was against TCEQ regulations to go up above a certain height. We suspended that rule,
right.
let that go. He's, any rule that stands in the way in a disaster, the governor has the ability to suspend that rule, and he will.
Right.
He takes sometimes more than 10 seconds to suspend a rule, but generally,
But typically not.
Typically 5 seconds.
So you're answerable in the sense of who is your boss in this effort to the governor, but you have pretty clear authority over a lot of these efforts. You can make decisions on a pretty quick timetable, right?
Yeah, but I don't do too much without checking.
Yeah, right. What are the obstacles to you getting these efforts underway? I'm just trying to understand, just as a process standpoint here, what's standing in your way? Anything at all? Are there political battles that you're having to navigate? I mean, you've talked about people who come and seek to make profit off of misery or tragedy. You obviously got to deal with those people, but what's, from a process standpoint, an obstacle to your ability to get this work done?
Well, I mean, rules and regulations, but Abbott will suspend all of those.
Yeah.
But he's also been pretty successful at getting the Trump administration, which has been very good on this so far.
You'd give the, they like good reviews, I hear, from the president. You would give the Trump administration positive reviews on their work
on this,
here.
yes.
On this, yes.
So far,
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we see is good. Special kudos to Cornyn. I mean, Cornyn is really good. He's kind of like an angel that's flying above us. I mean, when the bill came from the House with money He increased that by 7.4
Doubled it,
billion,
right.
doubled it basically, and stuff like that, and that was all him.
And the money is also coming. It's not only that the money's been approved, but the money is also coming quickly, right? They said we're going to make sure the money gets
we have a 10-day turnaround.
Right.
In other words, but you have to document it. I mean, what we keep telling the mayors and the judges is, look, you have to document all this stuff. If you don't, you're really going to get screwed 5 years from now.
We'll get you what you need, but it's all got to be lined out.
What happened in Rita and some of the things that happened in Rita and those places is some mayor didn't document how he spent the money. Well, the feds are going to come back and do an audit, in 3, 4, 5 years.
Save the receipt.
Yeah, save the receipt. And if you don't have that documentation, just like I suspect any business would do, you're not going to get it. So when you hear folks say, well, I didn't get paid from Rita, well, maybe you didn't get paid because you can't find the paperwork, and they're not going to give you the money without the paperwork. And then they go in and start clawing back from your local funds or not giving you the money and stuff like that. And so it's real. I mean, job one is that. One of the things that we really have to have from mayors and county judges today is the deadline, actually, is a list, not something real technical, not following a bunch of rules and stuff like that, but a list of what you need to spend money on. I need work on my courthouse, I need roads, I need whatever public infrastructure there is, and that is due today from every mayor and every county judge, and the county judges were supposed to go to the MUD districts, of which in Harris County there's 1,500 of them. Go to those MUD districts, any government entity, water improvement districts, all of them, and give us a list, doesn't have to be perfect, and a guesstimate of what that cost is. The reason that's important to get it in ASAP, and we've been telling them, is because the money that comes from the feds is not specific to Texas. It is disaster money. We got a couple of 3 disasters going on. You got California wildfires, you got Florida, and several things like that.
And now Puerto Rico.
And Puerto Rico.
Right.
And so what we have learned from studying the history of past disasters is early bird gets the worm.
Well, there's going to be, I mean, you hate to believe that there's competition for money when everybody needs it and everybody's tragedy is a real tragedy, but the reality is the money is finite, right? There's not going to be unlimited money.
It's not. Well, they just print it, right? But I mean, but they also, but in every disaster that's ever been, the early bird gets the worm. I mean, you may get funding, you may get your courthouse taken care of, but it may be 3 months later.
You think the mayors and the county judges are getting the message on documenting everything, on being prepared, on getting stuff in early?
We have had, very long and sometimes exhaustive meetings. What we've done is divided the region up into 5 regions. Aransas County, that area is one, Victoria is one, Fort Bend is one, Houston and Harris County are kind of its own deal, and then over in southeast Texas. And we've had meetings where the governor comes, I come, this whole team comes. We're all, and we've done that twice now. Any questions? And the second time was just me with the team, and explaining to them, if you've got questions, this is the time to ask them and stuff like that. But you have to ask. I mean, we're not going to override a county judge or
as you said, bottom up.
Bottom up.
Bottom up. Do you have a sense of the magnitude of the damage? I'm talking about from an economic standpoint. This is sort of back with your controller hat on, right? You understand the economics of the state. The state budget is, somewhat north of, but not significantly north of $200 billion over 2 years. I've heard, and you've heard, surely, we've all heard the estimates of the damage. 200 billion. I mean, frankly, it's probably a low estimate. Anybody built a house, you know what they tell you it's going to cost on the front end. It almost always costs more. I suspect that number is going to go up. But do you have your hands around the magnitude of this?
We won't know for sure until we get those forms back from the judges and stuff. But that's outside of housing. Housing will be with Commissioner Bush.
And that's really not that's one of the questions we've had about lines of authority. The housing stuff, the HUD stuff, that's really with Commissioner Bush.
That's right.
That's GLO stuff.
And FEMA.
Right, and
FEMA. Him and FEMA. That's
so the total number is going to be overwhelming. And in some respects, Chancellor, one of the things that you think about with this is it's a horizontal tragedy in the sense that it touches everybody and everything, but it's also a series of vertical tragedies because there's a public ed component. There's as you well know, there's a higher ed component. There's an immigration component. There's a healthcare component. And so your commission is in fact made up of the heads of a lot of these agencies, right? Mm-hmm. They're all contributing, and they've almost all got their own piece of this, right?
Right.
So Marath's got to deal with the fact that there are still campuses that are closed, that there are school facilities that need to be bulldozed and rebuilt, that there are still kids who are not in school even as of the middle of or late September. Sure. They're working essentially independently on their own pieces, but all under the umbrella of this
right.
of this effort. Do we have enough money in the state portion? I know this has become a political football over the last couple of days. Are we going to be able to take care of everybody in tandem with the feds? Do you have any concern about whether the resources are there?
Well, not without federal help. I mean,
right, of course.
The state can't do it.
Yeah.
But there have been some estimates that I've heard Governor Patrick and some others talking about $2 billion. And I think, in the deal that you were talking about where the tensions are, that's a situation where both of them are right. Yes, you're going to have to tap the rainy day fund.
Right.
Probably don't have to have a special session to do that. And the reason you don't have a special session to do that is because back in 91 or whenever, we authorized the Legislative Budget Board to move appropriated money from one place to another. And so you can take, as the governor and Patrick both have said numerous times, you can take money from the second year of the biennium
right.
that you have already appropriated, move it into this process right now, and then when you meet in January, you can replenish.
Effectively, you're going to spend the rainy day fund, only you're not going to spend it on the front end, you're going to spend it on the back end.
You replenish it when you meet again.
Right. Now, of course, this was going to be a challenging budget cycle going into 2019 anyway. It's probably going to get a lot more challenging as a consequence of this, but that was inevitable, right? I mean, that was going to happen. Yeah. So you're sympathetic to the argument coming out. I want to ask you about both sides of this since we're talking about this. The argument coming out of Houston is it's called the rainy day fund. If you're not going to use it now, what's it going to take to use it? Dragons with lasers for eyes? I mean, the reality is this is like the exact moment from an optics standpoint when you would access this fund. You can understand that?
I don't know of anybody that doesn't believe that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of confused as well.
You think they believe it up here too. It's just a question of when you access those dollars.
Yeah. It seems to me a question of do you have to have a special session of the legislature to access that money? The answer to that is no. You don't have to do it.
But you can still spend the money.
But before you do that, we need to know what you want to spend the money on.
Right.
Okay, make a list. Fill out the survey that we sent you and get that back to us so we will know what that list is.
So the Houston Chronicle editorializing yesterday that the message by Governor Abbott to the city of Houston is effectively drop dead. I mean, that's literally what this editorial said, was sort of per the old New York tabloid headline, Abbott to Houston, drop dead. You think that's a big exaggeration?
Yes.
Yeah. Governor's taking care of Houston. They're just going to do it in a way different from a mechanism standpoint.
I've never seen anybody, as I said before, to some people, it's a little intimidating working for the guy because we're sitting in a meeting, we're sitting in a damn meeting, and it's him and me and the FEMA guy and the head of emergency management, head of TEA and all this stuff, and the guy that answers all the questions is Abbott.
Yeah.
Well, they ain't supposed to be like that. They're supposed to not even be in the room. They're supposed to leave us alone. But so it's a little bit intimidating.
He's in charge.
He is in charge. I think what happened, I'm trying to think. I mean, he takes this hurricane personally, very personally. And I think maybe it started in Rockport. There was a little baby, probably named Harvey, I'm not sure, that was born right before the hurricane hit. And he was holding that little baby, and the mama was who had no house. I mean, it was gone, but she was just so happy about this little kid, and you could kind of see, tears in his eyes and stuff. But no, he takes this personally in Houston and every place else. I think what's happening is people's nerves are frayed. They're worried about, am I going to meet the deadlines for debris and all this kind of stuff? But it is. I don't, I've talked to both of them. I think they're both right. it's going to happen. Everybody understands that you're going to have to use some of that money, but I don't think you have to go in a special session.
And do right now. So in the course of the process of recovery and rebuild, how much are you looking backward in order to know how to look forward? This is the old adage is you can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. There's been a lot of second guessing and third guessing of what happened in Houston and Harris County. We should have known. The predicate was laid for this. We had a story yesterday that said that the Army Corps of Engineers has been concerned about the dam situation in Houston going back possibly as far as 2010. There's a lot of discussion about zoning and development rules in Harris County and Houston and whether those should have been known to contribute to a situation where the city or the area of the state was vulnerable. As you think about the rebuild, how much are you going back and asking yourself what should have happened as a way to guide what will happen?
Well, the first thing we did was go to the past disasters and cherry pick people from Katrina.
Rita, Ike,
Yeah,
old.
Well, yeah, Katrina mostly because you can learn a lot about what not to do.
Okay.
And so we got people that were heavily involved in that in our office. Fortunately, some of them work for wealthy benefactors who let them come for free and are paying them and stuff like that. And so they're in our office and give us really good advice on here's what you don't do, make sure you document, all of this kind of stuff like that. With regard to the future proofing, what the governor has suggested we do is, as we have the state divided up into 5 different regions, and we haven't announced this yet, but 5 different regions, we're putting together now a staff of people like the Sam Brodys of the world that's in Texas Monthly's issue this year, who probably knows as much about dams and flood control projects and things from Corpus all the way to the Sabine River. We're asking engineering firms to volunteer their time. Manzur Hurrani of Houston has already drawn up some ideas that he thinks are there and probably has spent a couple $100,000 of his own money on it, and a lot of people like that.
Right.
And that will be the staff of the regional task forces on future proofing or whatever it is you want to call it.
Right.
And so again, it will be the mayors and the judges in those 5 regions.
They'll be in the lead.
This will be the staff for those folks, so that keep in mind that money, the mitigation money for much of that stuff, doesn't get here until 6 months after landfall, which is February, maybe something like that.
Into next year, right?
And so we'll put that together shortly and hopefully have a recommendation on some of those things.
I guess what I'm saying is this is not just a triage effort. This is not just dealing with the damage. There is going to be a certain amount of thought given through your effort in partnership with the local officials to long-term work, infrastructure projects. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was, again, in discussion prior to the storm. Harris County Flood Control District did a bunch of infrastructure work on the bayous. In fact, they were supposed to be reimbursed for it. Still haven't seen some of the money. Now, of course, they're going to be desperate to get reimbursed. But stuff like that, where basically local entities are saying, here's the stuff that we have to do, not only to rebuild, but also to ensure that we can do everything to prevent what's coming next. Right. That will be in your purview to some degree.
Exactly. And that may be part of why the governor chose me. I'm not running for anything. I really don't give a damn what anybody except 9 people at A&M think of me. That's my reason. And
some days, not even that.
As long as I got 5.
You can count votes, Chancellor. I will say that. You understand how this goes. That's funny.
And so, we know why some of that stuff happened. Some developers had too much power in Houston and other places.
Well, now I know you're not running again.
And we're going to have to say that, and we're going to have to say, this is not a place you build houses. This is not a place you do.
But you understand, if you're able to get people to see the wisdom of what you just said and things like what you just said, that will be the biggest political feat you've ever pulled off. I mean, the fact is, if you can get people to finally put their self-interest aside for the benefit of this recovery over the long term, that will actually have been a thing.
Oh, we're going to do a lot of self-interest stuff, like that guy up in, actually it's a lady up in southeast Texas that was trying to rip the county judge off for all this, all that kind of stuff. But I'll just say something about insurance companies too. The history from what we've seen in our little search, the first money in disasters has to come from insurance companies. But what is happening too many times in this state, and it's happened in other words, is insurance agents are saying, well, let's see how much money you get from FEMA, or let's see how much money you get from the state, or stuff like that.
They're keeping their powder dry.
You know what? That's bullshit. That's not where the money is supposed to come from. The first money is supposed to come from them. So we need to know if you're really like a good neighbor, or if you're...
You don't mean anybody in particular, do you?
No.
Wait, let me see who the sponsor of this event is. Wait a minute.
Let's see, who are your sponsors here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to sing the nationwide song next? What are you going to do?
Well, and it's not like a good neighbor. We need to know if you're in good hands. We need. We know that you know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two. What we want to know is what you're going to do.
You need insurance to step up more than
they
insurance
need to step up. It is not good enough just to simply have in a mall somewhere a big show and a whole bunch of folks come and stuff like that. These people have been paying their insurance policies and their agents too many times, and I've had people make calls, surveys, talk to them.
Right.
I mean, hearing it too many times, I don't know. Now, I have hired a surveying company to go in from one end of the coast to the other and just see how extensive this is. And when we find out how extensive it is, we're going to let you know. But they have to step up. They got to quit telling their clients, wait till you get the FEMA money. They need to write a damn check right then. And the insurance industry in this state is not going to treat Texans like what we have been told in every other disaster that they've treated others. Now, when they say stuff like, well, you can't bring in, I just can't find enough adjusters. Well, FEMA found 2,000 or 3,000 folks to bring in.
You can find folks.
They brought them from 47 other states that didn't have a disaster. They can do the same thing.
Governors, share your point of view. Do other people in elected leadership with whom you're working on this effort share your view that the insurance company is falling down on the job? Insurance industry is falling down on the job.
I don't know.
This is just sharp freelancing?
Yeah.
Okay. How are you?
They're gonna before it's over.
Before it's over. How are you prioritizing where the need is most urgent? I talked earlier about this concept of Harris County and Houston. It's understandable, getting a lot of the attention, sucking a lot of the air and energy out of the room because of the magnitude of Harris County and Houston. Totally understandable. But you have these communities, and you know this because you're from Victoria. I mean, you understand these little communities where the magnitude of the damage on a percentage of the overall community is so much. We heard about one town on the coast where the mayor said a third of the town is destroyed, a third of the town needs to be bulldozed. So then basically only a third of the town is going to be left standing, and we frankly don't know that anybody's going to want to return to that third. So these littler communities, smaller communities, are really on a percentage basis taking on a much greater share of this burden. How are you prioritizing attention and time and focus on the big communities versus the little
we probably spend percentage-wise an inordinate amount of time in the smaller communities.
Right.
Harris County has, in Judge Emmett's disaster center that he has, you won't find anything like that outside the Pentagon. Yeah. I mean, it is as good as it gets. Yeah. They have some of the world's best experts on dealing with stuff and things like that. So on day-to-day things, right. But
not every county has a Judge Emmett, right?
But Aransas County doesn't have that, and so we spend a lot of time in Aransas County. We're sending our Texas Engineering Extension Service people to these rural counties to help them fill out paperwork. We're asking other government agencies that have folks that are good at that kind of stuff to send them in there as well to fill out paperwork, to get the forms in that we have today, but also to document other things. And we spend time, trying to convince them in some cases that they don't have enough debris. Some counties will say, well, I don't want to burn all of these trees because for whatever reason, stuff like that. And so we say, hey, we've got Forest Service trucks. We'll send 5 Forest Service trucks. We need to pile this up on the beach, and we need to burn this stuff because you don't have enough room to put the mulch in with all of these trees and stuff like that. And so we spend an awful lot of time, particularly in places like Rockport, Port Arthur, Beaumont, places like that really, I mean, Rockport suffered just horrendous damage.
Unbelievable. So I want to slightly transition over to a higher, I promised some higher ed stuff today, and I want to talk a little bit of higher ed. It's really some of it related back to this. So you've said a couple times how the Extension Service is involved in this, and a number of other A&M system resources and university resources are involved in this. Those resources have a price tag associated with them. Higher ed is constantly, and we have conversations about this, you and I do all the time, about whether higher ed has enough money available to do the massive job that it does when there's not a once in a 1,000-year storm. Who's paying the A&M freight on this? I mean, the university, not just your time and your efforts, but everybody south of you within the system devoting their time and attention to the storm as opposed to the university and to higher ed. Who's paying? Are you going to get reimbursed somehow by the state? Are you going to somehow see yourselves made whole as a system? You will ask?
We will ask.
Have you estimated what the cost to A&M system or Texas A&M University will be in the end on this? Do you have a sense? No? You don't, but you're not thinking about that now?
Not right now.
But you will ask for to be made whole?
Yeah, I mean, we'll ask. But, I mean, what basically the Extension Service folks who were dedicating all of their time and talents to ag extension, to healthy South Texas, if they're in that region, and all of those kinds of things. I mean, those folks they're just working overtime. I mean, they work late into the night to make sure they're there with the judge and forward their reports up and all this kind of stuff.
But you know what I'm saying. Basically, those people would be doing something else, but they were not doing that. But you're
I mean, there's a cost associated with it. We fly all of these hurricane people all over the state. We use our resources to do it and stuff like that. But we also think that's what we do. I mean, if you look at the recovery, at the rescue part of it, a lot of people don't know that most of the people that do the rescues that pluck 15,000 people off their roofs, the Texas Engineering Extension Service, which is Task Force 1. Task Force 1 is under the control of the governor. It's under the control of Nim Kidd, the disaster guru in the state. But the people are in College Station. I mean, Task Force 1 is is Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And so they pull 15,000 people out of those waters that were in imminent danger, which means they could have died.
Yeah.
And fortunately, coupled that with just a bunch of good Texans that use their boats to go in and rescue people and stuff like that. And now you get places like Second Baptist Church in Houston and others who deploying thousands of people in there to help people clean out their houses and all kinds of things like that. I mean, it's the good part about this is it sure showed the world that Texans are a different breed of cat.
Good people.
They're good people.
Right.
But the point I want to make is that we probably have the best disaster recovery operations that exist in the United States. I think the other 50 states would agree Texas is the best at high water rescue, all those kind of things. I mean, they send our people in Puerto Rico right now.
Right now.
But
again, I come back, Chancellor. I mean, in some ways, you've answered the question I asked at the beginning, and you were probably.
I'm not finished answering your question. Let me. But here's
continue.
And so, all of the local folks, these people are certificated, right? They go through training on a very regular basis at A&M. We don't do that on what we're doing right now on recovery. And so you maybe had a mayor that went through this 5 or 6 or 7 years ago in the last hurricane, but this is the first time this mayor may have been through this, or maybe the first time this judge.
Right.
And there needs to be, in my opinion, and I think this will come out in legislative hearings, there needs to be a mechanism to train mayors and judges and emergency management coordinators and certificate them on a yearly basis where they come probably to College Station because that's where most of this kind of training is.
Right.
So that they know all of the answers just like Houston and Harris County know all the answers because they've got the
Next
expertise
time, when
there.
next time comes, they're actually better prepared for that. I mean, that is an interesting aspect of this, is that you now have, horrible as this is, it's going to be a teaching moment or a learning moment for people going forward. So this should, God forbid, something like this happen
Yeah, at
again,
the end of this,
we
this
can now
county
take
judge is going to know this process backwards and forwards,
Right.
but he may not be there when the next one hits.
I want to ask you, both wearing your Hurricane Recovery Czar hat and your Chancellor hat, about DACA. I know this may seem like a strange conversation to be having today, but it's actually quite important. There is an assumption that a lot of the recovery over the next couple of years is going to happen on the backs of undocumented labor. And we have a conversation going on in this country about whether we need to remove people in this country, some or all, who are undocumented. Wearing your Chancellor hat, we know that there's a huge intersection between the DACA question and the higher ed question. Do you have a perspective on this, wearing one or the other of your hats?
Our kids are protected. I mean, they're protected by the university and by state law, no matter what the feds do. They get panicked because they read stuff in the paper, but it's not going to.
So your position is that with regard to DACA students who may be at Texas A&M University, they have nothing to worry about and should have nothing to worry about.
Right.
Proceed. What about the ability of the rebuild to happen at a moment when either people are removed or people are afraid to come out from the shadows, as the saying goes? Will the recovering and rebuilding effort be able to happen, in your opinion, without the use of undocumented labor?
We're not checking papers when we're asking people to haul stuff out in front of somebody.
Is that just your position, or is that the state's position? Is that the Fed's position? Will that be publicly communicated?
We ain't checking anything. Papers, driver's licenses.
Doesn't matter who you are. DACA is not an issue. You will be welcome to be part of this effort.
Get the stuff off the curb.
Doesn't make a difference. I mentioned, Chancellor, higher ed funding a little bit. I mentioned A&M, whether A&M would be made whole. 2 Fridays ago, the Lieutenant Governor appointed 5 members of a joint committee to examine higher ed formula funding. This is part of an effort that has been ongoing to talk about the degree to which the higher ed universe in Texas has access to enough resources. Speaker's not appointed as members of this committee. If you're asked your advice, this is going to deal with things like special items, and presumably deal with the ongoing conversation of whether universities and systems should be able to raise tuition and under what circumstances. You're asked your advice by this committee on higher ed funding. What would you tell them? What should they be talking about, and what should the product of their work be?
Well, you ought to be talking about excellence. I mean, I think the public recognizes just how important higher education is, from hurricane rebuilds to all kinds of technology to keep it from happening in the first place, and so many other things. I think there's sometimes a disconnect between some folks and how important higher education really is. I mean,
of course, they would say, Chancellor, why can't you just be excellent without needing more money? Why can't you just move stuff around?
Well, we do. As a matter of fact,
Right.
our overhead at Texas A&M University is 3.6%. I doubt there's a corporation in this room that has 3.6% overhead. I know there's not a state agency in the state of Texas that has an overhead of 3.6%. We use no public funds to build our dormitories. We use P3 projects for everything that generates revenues. So those things are not on our, not even on our balance sheets, not even
Right.
in P3 projects. We have our system offices have, I don't know, 250 or 260 people in the entire system office of Texas A&M. There's nobody more efficient than us. We operate that way.
So when they get together to talk about this, they ought to be focused on what they can do by way of investing in higher ed to allow you all to achieve excellence.
Yeah, I mean, if you want excellence, if you want the 2 flagships and others to move up into the top 10 of universities in the country, you will have to do for higher ed what California did years and years ago. You have to invest in it, and then we have to be good stewards and not do stupid things like, well, I'm not going to mention those things.
Man, you're tempting me. Lieutenant Governor Patrick appointed 5 members of this Joint Committee on Higher Ed Formula Funding, and it was interesting to me that the chairman of the Higher Education Committee in the Senate was not one of his appointees. In fact, none of the members of the Higher Ed Committee of the Senate were appointees to this Joint Committee on Higher Ed Funding. What do you think's going on there, Chancellor?
I don't know. I think it's a good committee.
You do? You don't think that it's an answer in search of a route there? I mean, that they haven't already decided that they want to ding you guys, and so they've stacked the committee with people who see that issue the same way as Lieutenant Governor?
I don't. I think I think if you want change, sometimes it pays to go outside the box rather than inside the box.
So you're good with the composition of the committee?
We are.
You are, okay.
But we would be good no matter who.
No matter what it was, right, of course. Smart. You know, I got to ask you a football question before we go to the audience, because I know that no matter what we talk about today, the only thing that the media will write about this interview will have to do with football. So I know historically that's what happened. How do you feel about Kevin Sumlin?
I like Kevin, nice guy.
Good overtime win the other day against Arkansas?
That's right.
Yeah. You still steamed about UCLA?
Yep.
Is his job safe?
I'm not the athletic director.
Oh, Chancellor.
You know I don't get involved in day-to-day
Funny
operations.
story, Chancellor, about that. Do you read the Fort Worth Star-Telegram?
Well, if they're here, yes.
There was a story in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on the 21st of September, which a little more than a week ago, in which your former athletic director, Eric Heyman, might have taken issue with what you just said about not being the athletic director or being involved with this. He was the athletic director of A&M from 2012 to 2016. He said in his story that he was told to give Kevin Sumlin an extension on his contract. He was not asked his opinion, that he was not the one in the driver's seat. He was told, do it. He was handed a contract extension. He said that the relationship between the administration and the athletic department is political. Now, let's stipulate, this is not the first time that's happened in history. Next, you'll tell me there's gambling in Casablanca. I mean, we know that this stuff is political. Here was his exact quote. There were situations in which they did not let the athletic director do their job. People there wanted to run the athletic department, not let the athletic director do it. It was political. Because of that, it was difficult to achieve what I wanted to achieve. He was asked who he meant. He said the leadership of the university. So he's critical of the leadership of the university getting involved in athletics. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to that. He made those comments on the record. Do you believe that there's an issue with that?
I think that those comments were made right after he received his last check from A&M.
Yeah.
First, Eric Heyman, bless his heart, was just never a good fit at A&M. Now, this may stem back to a confrontation that he and I had, and that had to do with the size of Kyle Field. He wanted to build Kyle Field at 90,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was really, working the board to get a smaller stadium. Like a lot of athletic directors, I'm sure he looked at it and says, my God, the worst thing we could have is a big stadium and we can't fill it up.
Half
and
empty,
so it's
right,
easy
yeah.
to fill up, if you're an athletic director,
Right.
a 90,000-foot stadium. I happen to disagree with that. I said, I think we ought to build, I think the figure we came up with is 102,500. Had absolutely nothing to do with the size of the stadium here in Austin.
Write that down.
And we had, it was a funny conversation. He said something like, well, I think I've got the votes for the 90,000 stadium. And I said, well, you do today, but there are going to be some new regents appointed in a couple of months, and this decision is not going to go to the board until that happens.
Right.
And he said, no, we're going to do it now. And I said, oh, I think you don't get to set the agenda about when it votes gets set on the board. And so anyway, we built it 102.5.
Right.
All of the stadium, we sold all the tickets in just under 18 minutes, completely sold out. And he did call and say, hey, maybe I misjudged it. But you get people, when people are shown the door, as Eric certainly was, you get them to say all kinds of things like that. So we really don't have.
But at the end of the day, any question he's raising about whether it was a good idea or a bad idea for Sumlin to get an extension or to be the coach, Sumlin has your confidence.
He was in the. Let me answer your first question. He was in the room. Eric was in the room when We made the decision. I do not recall him saying, I think this is a bad idea.
Putting his hand up, right.
He had the papers in his hand, said,
Yeah.
sign them.
But the question of someone being in your confidence.
I'm not the athletic director. You got to leave that to the athletic.
You understand, though, Chancellor, that the perception will be he didn't say yes, he has my confidence.
The coaching decisions are made by the athletic director, just like when Eric Heyman was here.
Despite what he says. All right, good. Chancellor, thank you. Let's go to questions from the audience. We have a hand in the back. We'll walk a microphone around. Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you for being here, Mr. Sharp. I'm Rebecca Belmetro, and I'm the chair of the Environment Committee at Texas State University. And when you mentioned the burn ban being lifted, my ears perked up. And I wondered how much you have the influence and the will to make this disaster be an occasion to improve the environmental footprint of Texas with the Superfund sites. Burning certainly is going to release a lot of chemicals into the atmosphere.
Right.
And so I'm wondering what you're going to do if you're going to consult with someone like Catherine Hayhoe from Texas Tech, not A&M, to really see that that's an important part of it.
Is there a way to satisfy concerns about the environment alongside moving the recovery along?
Well, certainly burning debris, particularly vegetative debris, is not something that enhances the environment. And I understand where you're coming from. But when you're ass deep in alligators, it's hard to think about draining the swamp. And we have, in order for these houses, towns, houses to get rebuilt, we got to get rid of some of this stuff. And when you're a small town and you don't have a landfill big enough to handle all of this kind of stuff, you're going to have to do some things that maybe you wouldn't do in the past, and that's burning the trash. Obviously, when it comes to asbestos and things like that, that won't be in the mix, and those things will be separated out. But we have to pick days when the smoke is going to go out to the bays and things like that, and it's things that we have to do. On the Superfund sites, EPA has already discovered one problem with Superfund sites. It's in the paper today, or it should be in the paper today. They discovered it a couple of days ago, and those things will be part of the mix and try to mitigate those things from happening today. But there are going to be things done that probably are not environmentally sensitive, but we're going to get people back in their houses.
On the subject of the environment, just since this came up, just as you were willing to speak truth to the insurance industry a few minutes ago, do you think that we need to be speaking truth to the chemical plant folks? There was a lot of concern about whether regulation on the chemical plants was too lax heading into this, and that caused the potential for, or in some cases the actual occurrence of, issues related to chemical plants in the affected areas. People then going, well, maybe in fact what we decided to do on regulation of chemical plants wasn't that good an idea after all. Do you need to have the same conversation with the chemical plant people that you just had with the insurance people?
Yeah, well, I don't know enough about it yet. TCQ has a task force that's looking into all of those regulations right now, and I haven't seen their results yet.
You don't have as much of it. You don't have an opinion on that yet.
I don't.
Okay. Question, ma'am. Hi.
Hi. Good morning. I have a two-part question. I know you said George P. would really be working with a lot of the housing, but I want to specifically know, when the FEMA money comes in, will that be distributed directly into the cities? And is there any type of deadline that we're fighting to get that money to ensure that the housing, the short-term housing recovery is handled appropriately?
FEMA and the General Land Office worked out their final agreement, I believe last Friday, a week ago today. And so they're in the process of doing all that. Now, there's a couple of things that are important. I mentioned Abbott has suspended some state rules. He's also got the administration to suspend a bunch of federal rules. For instance, the general, in virtually every disaster that's ever occurred, the reimbursement is 75-25. We got 90-10.
90-10, right? Yeah.
In Texas. That has never happened before.
Right.
Also, the deadlines for some of these mitigations were 30 days, and he got that extended to 90 days. Our share if you go by past disasters of disaster recovery centers, we're 20 in the state of Texas. We told him that we need a lot more. We had people that, if you don't have cars, it's pretty tough to get to a disaster recovery center, things like that. And with one phone call, Abbott got that more than doubled to 27. So there's 27 big disaster recovery centers, not to mention the mobile units, things like that that are traveling around to try to accommodate people. And so there's lots of he's had really good success in suspending a lot of federal rules as well as state rules as it applies to Texas.
Good. We're going to take a question up here. She's walking the microphone over to you, ma'am. Right here, ma'am, right there. Microphone. Ma'am. Yes.
Going back to your question earlier on looking back to the past, in 1979, Claudette dumped the largest rainfall in 24 hours on the lower Harris, Galveston, and Fort Bend area. At that time, Governor Clements formed a task force to look into what we thought should be done. Carol Dinkins was the chairman. We spent a lot of time on those issues, and I spoke briefly to John about it this morning. But one of our major recommendations was creating more reservoirs to the west. At that time, the point was made rather harshly to us that it was very expensive to build on expensive undeveloped land.
Right.
As a result, the reservoirs never took place.
Didn't happen.
I feel that John has an incredible opportunity, and he's certainly the person to get it done.
Right.
But the question I had was where and if there is still enough will and land and other resources, other technologies to get this done, to get the water off the pools on the west side of Houston.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think, I mean, it's just, I think everybody knows what needs to be done. I think they probably need to be reminded of it in a very big public setting. I think there just wasn't political will to get it done in the past. There's folks that had the land maybe that had a lot more stroke than folks that didn't have the land, and you wind up under 4 feet of water as a result of it. But
is this a moment when political will emerges from the reality of the storm?
I hope so. I hope that when these task forces report what needs to be done, and one of the reasons we're kind of staffing it with folks that from universities and folks from the private sector and things like that, and they can be kind of hidden in the process. I think the truth is going to come out. I think if you look at...
Is there enough land mass left or other technology?
Yeah, they're going to be looking at all of that. And for instance, Marta, one of the things that, Cypress Creek Levee could have stopped an awful lot of this, but it maybe hadn't been studied enough. It was proposed in 1941 and has been on the books since 1941 and never funded.
Still waiting, right?
That's a relatively cheap project compared to Addicks and Barker and some of the things there. But we're already looking at Addicks and Barker. But in the end, it's going to be those judges and those mayors that are going to vote on what they think about the recommendations that come forward. But the recommendations that come forward are not going to have anything to do with political considerations. It's going to be, here's what ought to be done, and then we'll see if we can build public support behind it. And I think this hurricane may have built public support behind it.
Finally, right, yeah, good. Chancellor, you got a big job ahead of you. Good luck and God bless. Thank you very much for everything you're doing. John Sharp, good. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Chancellor.